guys, so we're working on the recumbent guard this week. The recumbent guard is technically it's any position, any guard position where you're on your back. So it's a very general term, but we use the term seated guard, which is also a very general term last week. So it'll have a little bit of contrast to what we were doing. Specifically though, we're focusing on the collar and sleeve guard, which will lead us into what we're going to do tonight, which is going to be yet another position. So you can start to see how positions in jiu-jitsu are kind of like sub-chapters, right? Where you have like your big chapter, then you have sub-chapters, and then you have like slight offshoots and things like this. And it really is a very dynamic sort of collection of movements, and that's why we always want to try to systemize what we're doing, which is what we just worked on for our warm-up drill, right? We had the context of all those sweeps that we did last week, right? So we were in that seated guard last week. You know, I was using my headlights, my frames to keep distance, and my partner was maybe a little more conservative, which was enabling us to start to work the dummy sweep, the ankle pick, and of course the shin-to-shin sweep. However, we now run into the situation to where our opponent maybe is a little more aggressive. Maybe they're walking towards us with the intention of controlling our legs to then put us on our back and start to pass. So that's what we just did for our warm-up. As he comes in, I dominate the grip battle, and I set up my frames. So now, again, my frames are distance managing tools. I'm using these frames to keep him away from me. My headlights are also existent from the recumbent guard, right? If he starts to turn in a certain direction, I'm going to start walking in one way, my knees are still going to be pointing at him, right? These are still my headlights, just like we were doing last week where we were here, and as he turns, I was still keeping him in the headlights. So a lot of the concepts and the terms and the principles that we have are still going to be existent here in the recumbent guard. So we worked on two really basic sweeps, the double ankle sweep and the hook sweep. We're going to work on more of a position though tonight. If we are able to grasp this well, then of course we can start to look at how we can use this position to sweep. But we're going to be working on one of my favorite guard positions of all time. It's called the lasso guard. So the lasso is a really simple concept. I'm going to demonstrate how to get to the lasso guard, and then we're going to drill that. If we do well, then we're going to look at how we can use the lasso guard to sweep our opponent. So again, we're going to be starting the same way we did before. I'm in a seated guard, my opponent's arms are within reach, and I'm going to go to that collar and sleeve position. Now that I'm here, I'm going to go to the lasso guard. So this is what we call a lasso guard. So put simply, I am wrapping my leg around his arm. That's all it is. That's all a lasso guard is. But let's talk about more of the concepts behind it. Just like all of our sweeping concepts, we're trying to control a lever and then shift their center of gravity. The lasso allows us to not only control a lever, but dominate a lever. When I use a lasso, it essentially cuts off that arm. So it's really difficult for them to start to use that arm. Now look how just with this lasso, and we'll talk about how to go here in a moment, just with this lasso, look at how I can also start shifting his center of gravity just by pulling, turning, and pushing with the lasso. So the lasso itself is so strong, which is one of the reasons why you should absolutely learn it. It's almost like a hack. It's great for guard retention because it essentially shuts down one side of their body. It's really good for sweeping because it dominates a lever, making it very likely that we can shift their center of gravity and come up. So we're going to first get into the lasso guard. Let's start from the collar and sleeve. So I'm in this position. I'm going to get my grips, collar and sleeve. As I fall back, remember I frame right away. A real quick note, guys. A lot of people start to get this bad habit of like slowly laying on their back and then their feet come up. If that's the case, any good guard player is just going to walk past your guard, right? If I start laying on my back, now my abdominal muscles are keeping me up off the ground. I no longer have that structure from the forward lean. So as I start laying back, all he needs to do is just push my legs and just walk. So I need to immediately bring my feet up. So you should, it would be very beneficial to just practice something like this, sitting in front and just being able to lift your feet off the floor. And then, as I fall back, my feet are already up. Okay? That's a really beneficial exercise. So try to get into the habit of doing that. I get my grips, and my feet immediately come up. So once I'm here, I have two frames on his hips, and I have a collar and a sleeve grip. 4 points of control, that's perfect, perfection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left foot off of his hip. I'm using the foot on the side of the arm grip. As I take that left foot off of his hip, I'm going to bring that heel over and then under his arm. Now, I need to make sure that before I bring this foot off the hip, his arm needs to be in between my knees. Very rarely do we actually put the arm on the outside of our legs. We almost always want to keep the arm in the middle, so that way I have more control over this lever. This is not inherently wrong, but in the beginning, we're going to get a lot more bang for our buck if we keep the arm in between our legs. So again, I take my left foot off the hip, I'm going to bring my heel over his shoulder, and then I'm going to slide my toes underneath his armpit. As I do this, I'm going to start to slide my foot higher and higher until my big toe can touch his back. Now, I want my left hand to keep constant pulling pressure on his arm. A good rule of thumb that I like to do is keep their hand touching your hip the entire time. So I should be able to lasso without his hand coming off my hip. This makes it very tight because I've created a closed structure. If I let his hand come off, now he can start to circle his hand out, and that's how we can break the lasso. So I need to keep his hand close to me the whole time. So this hand is always touching my hip. I go over and then under. Once I'm here, my toe is on his back. I can now start to externally rotate my knee, which will start to rotate his shoulder out. And your partner can tell you if they feel the tension on their shoulder. They're going to give you a look, right? He's going to move around a little bit just so we can feel that lasso, right? And again, I'm just going to keep him in my headlights, and I want to feel this position. Now, pay special note here to my knuckles. Rotate back this way for me, please. Pay special note here to my knuckles, guys. The lasso guard is not just about grip strength. I don't have abnormally strong grips. The main reason that we're able to hold this position is because my left knuckles are framing against my left thigh. So not only am I trying to keep his hand close to my hip, but I'm trying to basically punch my own thigh so that as he tries to pull his arm out, my leg is in the way. My knuckles are framing my own thigh. So again, I want you to work to get to the lasso guard and just have your partner move around a little bit. Make sure that you're keeping a good posture break here, and I'm still trying to fold him over my leg, right? I'm still trying to fold him in half. You can even start playing around with using a lasso spider, but again, our focus right now is just the lasso guard. Let's do this from a different angle. So again, we're starting in the seated guard. I get my grip set up. I don't want to wait too long with this. You may not notice, and you may not have been aware, this is actually not a great position for my arms because I'm breaking my knee-elbow connection. If he's really quick on the draw, he can just do a quick cross step, boom, and immediately start passing. So I don't want you guys to do this and then start to take your sweet old time. The second I start to fall back, boom, I pull him in, right? I don't want that arm and my elbow to be extended away from each other for too long. All right, again, I get my grips, I go to my collar and sleeve guard. Now from here, I'm gonna take my left foot, I bring a heel over. See how I take my leg off of him? I go over, under, big toe on his back, and then open your knees out. Look how his hand is still close to my hip. The last thing that I'd like us to notice is that this is actually not a flexibility issue, right? If you're having trouble lassoing, it is not because you're not flexible enough to do it. It's because your hip angle is wrong. So I have very long legs, and I'm decently flexible, so I can just lay flat on my back and lasso most people. Now, that might not be the case for you. All you need to do is just shift your hip angle slightly to the side of the lassoing leg. So if I'm having trouble flat on my back and throwing the lasso in, just scoot and lay on your opposite hip. And I promise it'll be way easier to get the lasso in. And then look, all you have to do is just come back to your back and you have a very tight lasso. I'll demonstrate once more without talking. And again, he's gonna give me a little look here. He's gonna move around. Notice how my head is elevated. I'm on the small of my back, and I'm just working on controlling him from this position. Your partner will be able to tell you if it's tight. They'll be able to tell you if you should pull the arm a little more, and they'll be able to tell you if their posture is not quite broken enough, okay? So we're trying to break their posture, control the structure of their arm, and then eventually we're going to be controlling their base and sweeping them from here. Any questions on the lasso guard? Let's go. 1, 2. So in my opinion, the lasso is absolutely mandatory if you're going to learn guard retention. Like, there's no way around it. You have to know how to use a lasso. So we're working kind of two fronts here. We're working guard retention just through the sheer usage of the lasso guard, but then we will be using a little sweep. Funny enough, the lasso is actually not that powerful of a sweeping position. There's actually not that many sweeps you can do from here. There are some submissions. There's like mainly the omoplata, and then the sweep we'll do tonight. There's a couple of other ones, but again, it's almost always going to be used just as a guard retention position. I wanted to just quickly demonstrate how you can just drill this solo too, right? If you just take your own belt, you can work this like before class, okay? So what I would do is I would lay on my back and I would get my feet in the belt, kind of like I'm playing spider guard. And now all I would do is I would create tension by pushing one leg, and then I would work my lasso. I would just work the foot in, bring it back out, switch, lasso, and just kind of do this one side to side. And this is a great way to just kind of open up your hips, right? So it's good for hip mobility. It's good for lasso because, I'm sorry, spider guard rather, because I'm working my push-pull tension. And of course, it's also good for the lasso. Very commonly, we'll combine the lasso and the spider guard together, but that's a story for a different day. Now let's look at how we can use the lasso to sweep. We're gonna go over our basic lasso sweep, sometimes called a table sweep. I'll demonstrate it and then we'll talk about it. Here we go. So this is our lasso sweep. This is kind of, again, like the main sweep that you will do in lasso. There's really not too many others. So let's work on this one. There's two different contexts that we'll use this sweep in, either proactively or reactively. Let's talk about proactively first. I'm gonna, again, get my grip set up. I'm gonna pull the collar and sleeve. I'm gonna go for the lasso here. So I get my lasso and I have that external rotation tension on his shoulder. So I get my big toe on his back and then I open my knee out and that tilts him. That's the direction I'm gonna sweep him in because I have lever control on this side. This means that this arm will no longer be able to step out and post. So I'm gonna take him over this shoulder. Now, what I'm gonna do is once I'm in this spot, I'm gonna actually take my right foot, the one that's not really doing anything except for framing, I'm gonna take that right foot off of his hip and I'm gonna slide it underneath him and hook. So both of my feet are hooked on the same side of his body. Notice, however, I'm still keeping flared knees. I don't want to do this and tilt my knees in because now he can smash my guard down. We almost never bring our knees together purposefully. That's almost always an offensive move from the top player. So I bring my foot into the other side. I'm now going to take my right hand off his collar and I'm going to reach down for his leg. There's a lot of different ways to grab this. I like to just take my hand and grab like a vertical grip. So I'll demonstrate here. Just grabbing like a vertical grip of cloth. You can, of course, grab the pant grip like we would like a spider guard type of grip. You can literally just grab the ankle, or you can even underhook the leg. What we're doing is we're trying to bring ourselves closer to this leg. So I'm creating a perpendicular angle with my opponent. Now, most sweeps in jiu-jitsu, we talked about this last week, require Kazushi, or an off-balancing movement. To perform a Kazushi from here, I'm going to tuck my knees in towards my belly to bring his head past my center line here. So I'm going to tuck. And notice how that forces him to generally post his hand. As soon as we're in this position, I'm now just going to take my feet and stomp the floor. Notice how I come up with him. I'm still holding on to this leg because this is my opposite corner, lever control. So I have control of this corner of his body, and I have control of this corner of his body. Opposite corners are going to provide a lot better pinning pressure and also control over his body's ability to rotate. Now, once I come up out of this, I need to come up so I can score the sweep. So this is where we start to get into a little bit of a pickle. Technically, there is a submission I can do here called a bicep slicer, where I put my shin bone on his bicep and then I crush his forearm into his arm like that. You are not allowed to do that. You cannot do that until you're a blue belt at like the local competition level. For like high level competition, it's not until brown belt. So what that means is you have to be very aware of what this shin is doing. Don't come up wildly and slice your partner's bicep, okay? So what I need to do is I need to post my left hand, and I'm just gonna do a technical get up, the same way that we finish when we come up out of like a double ankle sweep. I'm gonna lift my hips up a little bit, and now I'm just gonna slide my shin backwards. So I'm doing like a windshield wiper movement with my left shin. So I slide it down his wrist bone here, and now I generally can go to knee on belly, or you can just drop to a side control position. So just be very slow and controlled after you tip them over. Don't just wildly come up and injure your partner's arm. Generally, they won't appreciate that, okay? Let's look at this again from the top. So I'm, again, starting in the seated guard. I get my grips. I set up my frames. I now throw in the lasso and see how I have that tension, that external rotation on his shoulder. I'm gonna start to take him in this direction. So I bring both feet to this side, and I'm gonna reach over and control this opposite leg. Again, I can grab a vertical grip, I can grab the spider grip, or I can even underhook his leg. I just need to bring my body to it. Now, I'm gonna perform the Kazushi by bringing my knees to my chest, and then stomping my feet to the floor as I punch this leg up. This is not necessarily mandatory, punching the leg, but it obviously generates a little bit more momentum to roll them over. Against a person much bigger than you, this will probably be mandatory. Once I'm here, let go, post, technical get up, and then finish in the top spot. This is your proactive approach because I am actively going and getting their leg. Reactively, this is actually going to be kind of like what we call a trap sweep, where I'm allowing them to do something that would be considered a good move, but that's putting them into the sweep. So what this would be, from the lasso, when I take this foot off of his hip, what's he probably thinking? Sweet, time to pass this dude's guard because I don't have a frame on his hip anymore. This is why this sweep is a bit of a double-edged sword. Unless you're very, very good at this sweep, you know, it's just something you need to be cautious about. So that's why we're not always focusing on just using the lasso to sweep. It's, again, guard retention. This is a guard retention technique, and then we can use it to sweep if we're able to. So what this means is if I take that foot off the hip and he starts to step, he's just getting his leg closer to me to just put me in that perpendicular angle faster. So I don't necessarily have to run and grab the leg. It's already there. So as he starts to turn the corner, then I can just perform that Kazushi and come up on top. So again, you can practice this both ways. Just kind of communicate that with your partner. You can ask them, okay, let me go get the leg first, or hey, can you start to pass on this side and come around? It doesn't matter if they're standing or on their knees. Just as long as I grab that leg, I can take them over. I'll demonstrate once more without talking. I like to push the leg at the end. Just gives me a little bit more control over their guard so it can't invade my position again. And then I'll show the proactive or the reactive version once more as well. So in this situation, Coach Seth is going to kind of start passing my guard. So notice how, again, I use the momentum of him passing to sweep him. Okay, guys? So again, the lasso, first and foremost, guard retention. This is a bare minimum technique for guard retention. If you don't know the lasso, your guard retention is going to be trash. So you have to learn how to lasso. And then, if you are comfortable with using the lasso, you can start to play around with using it as a sweep. Just remember, it is a double-edged sword. Unless you nail it, they're now passing your guard. So be smart about what you're doing. Any questions?
Can you show the underhook come up one more time?
Sure. So the grip situation is just this. Well, we'll go this way, actually. So there's just a couple different ways to grab the leg. I can either grab like a parallel grip here. I can grab the spider grip here. I can grab their heel. Or I'm just going to go for an underhook where I'm going to stab my arm through and come in like this. This obviously creates a very strong angle, but it's a little bit more time intensive. I've got to really like dive underneath them to get it. So you guys play around with whatever one you like. But yes, once I get this, again, I tuck my knees in. There's your initial Kazushi, and now I start to stomp. Let go, technical get up, and finish. All right, guys, let's go. 1, 2.